Will you pray with me? Gracious God, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of all of our hearts be acceptable to you, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. How many hats have you worn in your life? How many times have you changed a job, a career, a town, a name? Maybe you've gone from child to partner to parent. Maybe you've gone from single to married and back again. Maybe some of us have even changed our genders or decided to identify in a way that is substantially different than what was assigned to us at birth. It seems to me that more than ever in human history, we modern folks have the power to change our identities, don't we? And it can be an empowering thing, a liberating thing. Yet oftentimes underneath our desire to change the hat we are wearing is an awareness that we have not yet found our true identity. That we possess a deep craving to have the inside and the outside of our lives match up and to be truly known for who we are. For many of us, our spiritual quests are essentially a longing to discover the person that God has created us to be. This morning, in the beautiful sacrament of baptism, we celebrate that longing. Baptism is one of two central rituals that mark our journey of faith as Christians. Along with the sacrament of Holy Communion, baptism opens us up to an awareness of our deep union with God, the reality that we come from God's love, and it is to that love that we return. With such a profound theology in mind, we might expect that this ritual would be transcendent and mysterious and beyond our human comprehension. But in truth, it is not. Its power lies in the fact that we experience it through the ordinary elements of our ordinary lives. Water, cloth, oil, hands. Through these things that we encounter each day, the simple stuff of life, baptism teaches us a profound truth. It teaches us who we are. That underneath all of the complex identities we've claimed for ourselves, there is only really one that matters. One that we heard in the words spoken to Gavin this morning. As folks who attempt to follow in the ways of Jesus, we believe in that core identity. We believe that in meeting us in our simple human experiences, the tears and the laughter, the disappointments and the wondrous mysteries of our daily lives, God reminds us that this deep union is already happening. That's the meaning of the incarnation we celebrated just a few weeks ago at Christmas. That's why God shows up in this humble man from Nazareth, born to peasant parents, raised as a refugee, to remind us that there is no part of our messy, complicated human lives where God cannot meet us. Struggle to reconnect and get back on God's path, to remember who God created us to be as people and as a community. In the gospel story this morning, we hear of a community that was facing that kind of struggle. For standing on the banks of the Jordan River was a crowd of people yearning to find deeper union with God, struggling to regain their true identity. They came from all walks of life: farmers, peasants, scribes, Pharisees, tax collectors, men and women, believers and skeptics, and one young carpenter. They had made the long, difficult trek into the wilderness to be confronted by the provocative and challenging words of John, the desert prophet. Remember John? We got to know him a little bit during Advent. The guy who called us all sons of bitches. Remember him? Yeah, that guy. You see, you didn't come to John if you wanted to feel all warm and fuzzy about yourself. You came to John if you wanted to face yourself honestly. For John was proclaiming that the kingdom of God is coming, a new day is dawning, and if you want to be part of it, we're going to need to change the way we live in the world. We're going to need to let go of all the distortions and masks and layers that we've accumulated in our lives and get back to the basics of who we're called to be. And that is a really hard thing to do. I often wonder at the fact that Jesus was standing with that motley crowd. What led him to those shores? Was he seeking a new path? Was he yearning for a new identity? Was he wrestling with a sense of call, maybe resisting it? We don't often imagine Jesus sharing our spiritual and emotional struggles. We're much more comfortable believing that he always knew exactly who he was and exactly what God wanted from him. The declarative language of the Gospels tends to imply that Jesus' life is inevitable, that he didn't have a lot of choice on his path, that God set the script and Jesus followed. And yet, if we take seriously our faith conviction that Jesus is not only fully divine, but fully human, then choice must be a part of the equation, an essential and sacred part. For if Jesus fully shares our humanity, then doubts and fears and questions come with the territory, don't they? And I believe that at that moment in his life, Jesus was indeed struggling with his spiritual identity. He was not a young man when he sought out John. He was 30, well into middle age for his era. My guess is he'd done a lot of living up to this point. And contrary to what we might think, Jesus did not have a chorus of angels following him throughout his life. Once he left the manger, I believe he must have faced the same kind of growing pains and challenges that we all do. Beyond a precocious moment in a synagogue when he was 12, it's unclear if he was even aware of the special calling he had on his life. For we don't hear much of him until 18 years later, where we find him today, ankle deep in mud, along with the other seekers. Did he feel lost? Did he have questions? Did he have regrets? Many of us are drawn to this place because we are seekers, struggling with our spiritual identities too. It doesn't matter if you were born in the church or just walked in today. We are all looking for something. We're caught up in our own questions and doubts and distortions about who we are and how we are called to live. And as we all know, the world will provide us with plenty of answers. The world is more than happy to tell us who we are, that our worth is found in how we look and what we drive and how much we make and how much we weigh. It tells us that our value is measured by our achievements. It tells us a story, and we'll hear this a lot in this election cycle, that the world is divided into winners and losers. And woe to those of us who don't make the cut. But many of us know that that story is hollow. We know that somewhere, deeper than our egos, deeper than our fears, that our identity is not found in our job title or our Facebook status. That we are worth more than the bottom line of our paychecks or assets. And when we find the courage to reject that narrative, we feel drawn to find a different story, a deeper story, one that can peel back the false layers the world has laid on us and help us connect with the heart of God and remember who we truly are. And so many of us come here, crazy as that is. For in this era of increased skepticism, and rightly so, over institutional religion, and the rise of those who describe themselves as spiritual but not religious, the decision to be a part of a faith community is really rather countercultural. Why wake up on a Sunday morning to be with other folks just as broken as we are? Why listen to ancient texts and sing old hymns and offer prayers for people we don't even know It's just so much easier to grab brunch or stay home with the newspaper, or on a day like today, just pull the covers over your head. What are we hoping to find here? After all, it's not as if this place will hand us the answers to life's big questions, right? If you've been coming for any length of time, you'll know you'll just emerge with more questions. Harder questions, deeper questions. And yet we come. Like the bedraggled folks who gathered on the banks of the Jordan, I believe we come because we know something else is out there. And something else is in here. We come because we know that God offers us a different path than the one we've been treading. And we know deep in our hearts that God knows us in a way that the world doesn't. And that's what baptism is all about. When Jesus goes under the waves, he goes in as a carpenter, a seeker, a wandering rabbi, wondering who God is calling him to be. When he emerges, he hears these words: "You are my beloved child, with whom I am well pleased." In the chilly waters of the Jordan, uncertain of what the future might hold, Jesus quite literally plunges into love. You are my beloved child, with whom God is, with whom I am well pleased. No conditions, no requirements, no expectations. In fact, at this time in his life, Jesus appears to have very little to show for his 30 years. He's preached no sermons, he's taught no lessons, healed no lepers, performed no miracles. And yet, before he had even begun his ministry, God reveals to Jesus his true identity. You are my beloved child. And it is the same for us. The sacrament of baptism is not given to those of us who are perfect or special or remarkable for the things we have done, thanks be to God. It's one of the reasons that we baptize babies before they can do anything or say anything. Because baptism is not about what we do, it's about what God does. It's an invitation to plunge into God's love unconditionally. No matter how we fall short or fail, nothing that we do or fail to do can remove that precious identity from us. Because our relationship with God is the one relationship we can't screw up, people. The sacrament of baptism doesn't initiate this relationship with God. And it doesn't change anything about it. It simply reveals what has always been and will always be, but what so many of us have forgotten. Under all the hats we wear, under all the changes of address or identity we may claim, there is one sacred, simple truth. We are God's beloved. Full stop. Nothing else required. We don't have to buy anything, or wear anything, or prove anything. Baptism does not create that reality, but it reveals that reality in a way that touches us deep at our core. And it is from this place of deep love that Jesus is empowered and liberated to launch his radical and countercultural ministry, which touches the heart of the world. And it's from this same place of deep love that each of us lives into the call that God has placed on our hearts from the beginning, before we've even said anything or done anything. Whether we are just starting out in our lives, as Gavin is, or whether we've got a lot of living under our belts. Each time we remember who we truly are, we are empowered and liberated and launched into life, real life. From that first plunge into love, we can plunge into life, knowing that the only story we need to remember is that we are the beloved children of God, with whom God is and always will be well pleased. Thanks be to God, and amen.